Hello and welcome to ngAir. On today's episode, we welcome back the wonderful Justin Schwartzberger.
Hey, how's it going?
And we are honored to be in the presence of the great Patrick Stapleton.
Hey guys.
Welcome, Patrick. Now, Patrick is an aficionado in many things. He knows many, has many skill sets. But one of his most proficient, perhaps, is Webpack, or maybe the one he's most well known for besides Angular 2. And so I know that he is very psyched for today's episode, and our special guest for today is potentially even more of an expert in Webpack than Patrick, the great Sean Larkin.
Hey guys, how's it going? Thank you. And for the record, I like to think of myself as the muse and Patrick as the machine. So I usually come up with the good ideas, and he's like, "Oh yeah, let's do this," and he'll whip it up real quick.
Yeah. So Sean, why don't you give us an introduction to yourself and let us know a little bit about your background?
Okay, so my name is Sean Larkin. I live in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I work for Mutual of Omaha as a UX developer. Kind of only been on the dev scene for about 3 years, but I'm a tech support rep gone rogue, and really wanted to help change people's lives. And since then, it's been kind of a crazy ride, learning a bunch of different things. And now, really, my passion's kind of evolved into helping developers make their lives easier through the toolings and all sorts of features that are available. So that kind of is what led me to Webpack. After I had the opportunity to speak at ngConf about Angular and Webpack. Kind of the response was overwhelming from the Angular community, because they had questions like, what is Webpack, and who is Webpack, what does it represent, why isn't this guy getting paid to work on this project, and how can we help? And so I tried to I reached out to the team and helped kind of bridge the gap between the communications and things like that. And the next thing you know, I'm on the core team, and we've made a lot of really great strides with documentation, and Webpack 2 on the horizon.
That's awesome. One thing that's a little bit confusing, I didn't actually realize, Sean, is you're a UX developer. I get the you work in tech support before in the past, and kind of the Webpack is build DevOps, like that's kind of interrelated. UX is a little bit different angle. Like, how did you get into UX?
Well, I started at Objective-C shop, and then I learned Ruby, which was kind of like stark contrast. But I realized that quickly, being able to kind of touch the user through the code we write and kind of impact the things that they do really was kind of fulfilling for me. And so JavaScript and front-end technologies started with Angular, and then kind of progressed from there to just JavaScript in general, and even just being exposed to all the other frameworks we get every 2 months or 3 months. And so it's been kind of exciting to be able to have something you can kind of put your stamp on and be like, hey, I did that, and it's making people's lives better.
Okay, let's get into the main subject here. So Webpack. Most people, I think, have heard Webpack. Many people have used it, but why don't you just give a kind of brief overview of what Webpack is and what problem it's trying to solve?
Okay, I'll be as brief as I can. So Webpack is a static module bundler, and what does that mean? Well, if you've ever worked with Node.js, it has out of the box an environment in which you write modules and require them into other files. And so the way that Node works is that it's encapsulated in all your functionality and files, but there isn't anything like that on the browser. And so Webpack kind of takes a two-pronged approach. So one, it emulates a module loading environment for the web, so that you can use modules and load them efficiently and have separate features and files and organized code. But at the same time, it creates these optimized bundles that are meant to be super high performance. So overall, I guess elevator pitch would be it's a web optimizing tool and workflow enhancer that makes no opinions about the tools or frameworks that you're using.
So I know that a lot of people love Webpack. I mean, you guys, a lot of people in this show, right? Kent C. Dodds loves Webpack. Everybody loves Webpack.
Yes, he
But
does.
there's also a lot of people who don't like it, mostly because the common criticisms that I hear is that it tries to do too much, right? Like, and that because it's kind of configuration based, many people, even though you use it, in fact, I would wager to say most of the people listening to this show right now who use it don't actually understand it. So what can you tell us about that, and kind of your thoughts when you hear that type of criticism?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that kind of hits the nail on the head. Some of the coolest things about open source community is that we have access to all these proof of concepts and boilerplates and usages for things like Webpack with their, with respect to frameworks. But absolutely, people may use those boilerplates, but they don't really understand Webpack itself. And so kind of one of my goals is trying to push not only the usability aspect, which has been one of the huge complaints, but also the learning opportunity for people to be able to use Webpack as well. Because probably besides the most common, which is like, oh, your docs are terrible, or it's too low level of a tool. The third thing I hear is, once I get it, I love it. It's incredible and it's super powerful. And I would, there's nothing else that compares to that tool on the web.
Now, I know that you can integrate Webpack with a lot of other build tools, if you're using Gulp or Grunt or whatever already. But if I'm doing Webpack right, is it the idea that you would use it for everything? Like, is that the sort of ideal situation that your entire build process, you would, if Webpack doesn't already have the capabilities, you'd be building, plugins to Webpack and that type of thing?
Yeah, for the exception of things like running tasks, that's still perfect for Grunt and Gulp. Or you can even just use NPM scripts. That's kind of a common design pattern, I guess you could say, for those who use Webpack, is they just run NPM scripts for their workflow. But anything besides that has to do with any of the assets in your project, Webpack most of the time can do out of the box. But if it doesn't, yeah, you should absolutely take on either writing a custom loader or writing a custom plugin, and because it can do almost anything. The API is so rich and powerful.
Now, there's just recently a major upgrade to Webpack 2. So what's the difference between Webpack 1 and Webpack 2?
So a lot of the changes were kind of subtle, only because we're still working on being able to publish some really good release notes for each time we publish a change. But some of the notable features you've probably seen floating around on a What's New in Webpack 2 doc. But some of the most notable are the ability to have a new loader syntax, which lets you provide options per each loader when you chain them. So kind of one of the biggest complaints was that when you try and write loaders and chain them together, passing the options like a query string is really hard to read, and it's kind of a pain to work with. And so that's one of the big features. Another one, which is the ability to support system.import to act as a asynchronous loading functionality. So if you wanted to asynchronously load assets, you can use the system.import syntax, and Webpack will create what we call an async bundle, specifically designed for the Webpack environment to be lazy loaded. And then the last, I think of like the three most notable changes. So the last one, which really kind of enhances the workflow for some people, is besides just, since Webpack's configurations are just a JavaScript file that exports an object, it now supports being able to export a function that returns an object, and Webpack will pass you the environment flag that you provide for it. So this allows you to kind of have a replacement for what people would use in the past, where it's like requiring process.env to get environment variables, and instead just have it automatically provided through Webpack. And so you can have a lot of kind of ternary operators or ways to make a single config a little bit more readable and easy to manage. Oh, I guess then the one last thing would be having native ES20 2015 tree shaking support. So I know that that's a huge buzz feature, I guess you could say, that everybody's been really excited about.
Yeah, I think that's something that's been in some other bundlers like Rollup before, but and I think that was a commonly requested thing to be part of Webpack. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So before we dive into the code demonstrations, Justin or Patrick, did you have anything to add? Anything that we missed?
Yeah, I guess it's good to talk about how the creator of SystemJs and the Webpack creator are working together to basically combine forces and have Webpack talk to SystemJs and SystemJs talk to Webpack. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's been a really awesome and exciting experience. So Guy Bedford, the author of JSPM and SystemJs, I reached out to him in hopes that we could maybe have some interoperability between SystemJs, which is truly just a dynamic module loader, which is completely separate from Webpack, and the module bundler. So Webpack's magic, I guess you can say, is all because you can do this statically in a build step. And so things that we don't support out of the box, or even like issues or features we really don't support, are like trying to do a dynamic load of a module. And that's because the Webpack environment is created statically during that build step. And so the idea was maybe to say, hey, well, Webpack can create kind of an output template that can conform to system.register or the system.registry spec. And so Guy met with the Webpack core team, and we talked about maybe some ways to brainstorm how we could create some of that interoperability and hopefully conform so that we're spec compatible when it comes to loading modules dynamically. So that's been really cool, and Guy has even taken upon himself to write a plugin, using Webpack API. I mean, I'll just quote him by saying that learning to create a plugin was fun. He did say that. So it's one of the many awesome things about this open source community, and people willing to take what others could perceive as competing tools, but instead, working together to just make a better experience for the developer.
Yeah, I think
go ahead, Justin.
one thing that's interesting about it too is the thinking about it in terms of it's not just a loader and a tree shaker and this sort of thing in a bundler for these assets and stuff, but you have that ability with the loaders and the plugins to now start thinking about, I can keep writing my application code in a certain way and do these transforms or optimizations with some chunks of code, especially when we talk about like the Angular world and the things like template URLs and style URLs and stuff like that. You can plug in this functionality to your build system through the Webpack stuff and keep writing your code in a consistent way, right? And it's not affected by that, and you can do a lot of magic with that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best part is that, like you said, you can fit it into any workflow, any environment, any stack, and most of the time it's just automatically. You can download the npm modules for plugins and loaders needed, and it happens. But if you need to write a custom plugin, although the documentation isn't the best, there's a lot of great tutorials or examples that show you how to do it. I mean, and on top of that, Webpack's core code, the source code, is actually built on the same plugins that you use externally. So a plugin that you would write, for your config is using this exact same library or mixin that supports plugins internally. And then, even to that measure, I've been told I've had the idea of kind of user land versus Webpack land, and so what's really neat is that for these tools like the Angular CLI, which I believe we just cut a release for the master, I think within the next, just now or in the next hour or so, we had to take the challenge of, well, we want a first-time user to not worry about it, so let's use plugins and loaders to instead have an idiomatic experience and not a Webpack experience. And so, like, not only can you do a lot of awesome Webpacky things, but you can author plugins so that the experience feels the same for the user, meanwhile having all this awesome functionality.
Patrick pointed out that we mentioned the word tree shaking, but we didn't actually explain what it means. Do you want to give us kind of a quick description of tree shaking?
Yeah, and I know Rich Harris might say that's not exactly what tree shaking is, but in the Webpack world, we have the best way to describe it is this. So tree shaking is where, in Webpack at least, where unused codes or imports or exports from libraries are turned into empty modules through Webpack. And so when you minify your code, whether it be through uglified.js or a specific JavaScript loader that minifies, those empty modules are then removed from your bundle. And so therefore you have, for example, if you are using Lodash and you didn't have Webpack, let's say you just used Grunt, you're including that entire Lodash library. But with Webpack, you can import one of those Lodash functions, and then all the rest of them that are not used or related to the dependency tree will be completely removed from the bundle because they're not needed.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. It allows you to create really small package sizes for your client-side web application. So that is super exciting.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, let's dive into some code demos here. So I believe that you were going to first show off the anatomy of a Webpack output bundle, right?
Yes. So the best way to do it is by just whipping up a new Webpack project. I wanted to keep it kind of framework agnostic so that there's not any like transforms or extra libraries involved, but then that way you can kind of see exactly what's going on. So we're going to start from scratch or ground zero and just create a small Webpack config and show you what the output looks like and kind of explain what this Webpack bundle is. So let's share the screen, if I can find that there. So we'll just start off by creating, here we go, finding the right window I want to show open. Here's our editor. Let's open up a...
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Sure. How would I go about doing that?
Good question. It's so live.
Oh, I see. Oh, the text. That is. Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. I see. Okay, so this is just Patrick's Angular 2 Webpack 2 starter that I have for another demo, but we'll just start off by creating a couple files and folders and start from there. So I guess first things first would be I'm going to create the config and save it to a specific folder. So a Webpack config in its simplest form is just an entry and an output. And so we can do that through exporting an object. And we'll provide the entry property. And I'm just going to, let's say, call it index.js. And then our, let's make it a little bit more relevant, source / index.js. And then output property, which describes to Webpack where we want to place the bundle. So I believe it's file name, and we'll just call it bundle.js. And the path, and we'll specify dist. So obviously this is just a new file, so I'll save it to my set of code here. Okay. And we'll rename that. see, save as. Okay, so I'm just going to open up that project real quick, and we will take a look at that here also. We'll hide some of these tabs for now, and delete the one I improperly misnamed. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and just create a source folder where our index is going to lie, and then the dist folder will be created for us. Let's see. I'm typing in the terminal right now. Should I just share both at the same time?
If you can, yeah.
Let's do it. Let's share the entire screen. Inception, and there we go. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly make a source folder, and then inside of it we'll create an index, which is going to be our application entry point. And then we also want to have this entry point require another file so that Webpack can bundle them together. So okay, that seems like that's a good place to start. And one other thing, we'll go ahead and npm init and install Webpack while we're waiting. So let's take a look now. I'm going to go ahead and just create some content in here. Let's say function. And we'll log to the console. And then we'll import that. So Webpack by default can support the ES 2015 imports with Babel. I'm just going to require it for now, just so that we can take a look at the config. And then, so I don't have to install it globally, I'm just going to add a build script. So build and Webpack. Let's make some show progress in colors. Cool, that's a good start. And remove bad JSON. Awesome. So let's take a look and see what we have here so far. So here is the Webpack bundle. Thanks for hanging on there. So right now you're going to see, well, Sean, the code that you just wrote is shorter and less lines than all of this nonsense up top. And so, like I said, Webpack is emulating a file or a module loader in the browser runtime. And so I like to call this the Webpack bootstrap code, and you can even see it commented here as Webpack bootstrap. So the way that this works is that it is going to take any of the modules that are bundled, and it is going to correspond a chunk ID which is these individual modules here, and then request them using what's called Webpack require. And so you can think of Webpack require as the fake Node.js require that happens in the browser runtime. And then down here, each of those individual modules are, let's see, are listed here below. And when one requires another, it's actually using that Webpack require statement. So in its simplest form, the require process is really just emulated through Webpack here and this bootstrap. Now, mind you, when you have a much larger app and you start to install dependencies that may share other dependencies, Webpack has the functionality to not only sort for optimization, but then remove duplicate instances of those chunks or modules.
Yeah, I think for me, that's where the complication comes in, because obviously the simple case is sort of what you have outlined here, where you just give it an entry file and just let it do its default thing. But a lot of times, like if you want to create separate packages, or if you want to include something external or whatever, you have to kind of customize, maybe do code splitting, whatever else. So I guess you don't have to necessarily go through all those different variations now, but I guess what would be your recommendation for a strategy for someone who to learn all this stuff, maybe good resources or that type of thing?
So the best resource that we have currently is going to be not only just our Webpack getter. We have Stack Overflow, but we have our documentation. I think to me, you can understand the documentation and you'll find it really useful if you understand the core concepts. And so, I have some resources and slides and links that we can provide. And we also just published under a separate repo called Awesome Webpack. And so you can go to GitHub and search awesome-webpack, and you're going to find a collection of all our documentation links, great repos, and then news, everything regarding Webpack you can find there. And that's community-driven. I've liked that that's been growing so far really quickly, and it's getting a lot of circulation. But the documentation and then reading the source code, as crazy as it sounds, is really insightful to show you all the different features.
Reading the Webpack source code, you're saying?
Yep, absolutely. You can find a lot of hidden gems in there.
Well, reading source code through the debugger is probably the best one.
Ooh, good segue.
One of you two should write a blog post of going through the experience of doing that, like learning by reading through the code as you're kind of working through an issue. I think that would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we could do that. I don't see why not.
All right, let's, for the second thing we were going to show was for plugins. Before we do that, I just want to mention really quick for people that are watching live right now, if you do have a question for Sean or any of the other panel members, you can tweet with the hashtag ngAir, N-G-A-I-R, and we'll get to that right at the end of the show. All right, Sean, if you want to dive into plugins.
Sure, plugins. Okay. So the best way that I always talk about writing custom plugins and using them is by using Chrome development tools and kind of exploring the available options that are possible when you create a custom plugin. So I'm just going to pull up one of Patrick's repos, which is the Angular 2 starter. Let me find the right one to pull up here. Let me change my screen. There we go. Yeah, it's this one. And we'll open that project. Okay. And Patrick, you just made a bunch of updates to your Angular 2 Webpack 2 starter?
Yeah, that changed up everything. I have like one configuration file. Yeah.
I really like it.
Yeah, I added async loading and like a bunch of other stuff. But yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so the best way to kind of explore or create custom plugins, in my opinion, is to actually use an inline function inside of the plugins array. And so this will let you kind of, with ease, explore kind of all the plugin hooks that are available in kind of just an inline way, instead of having to create a separate module, loading it, etc. So I've actually added a command inside the package JSON which will open up, or which will output a link to Chrome DevTools. And so for Node 6 out of the box, you can actually have Chrome DevTools to help debug your Webpack builds, or any Node process for that matter. If you want some more bleeding edge features, you can use the Node-Nightly npm module. So now that I've shown you that, I'm just going to go ahead and run the quick command. And so npm run debug. And I will just paste the link, since there's nothing really interesting in the output for terminal, and show you the browser window. So here we go. So when you run this command, you'll get a URL that you can place inside of your Chrome URL. And so this automatically opens up what you're used to in common web development, which has the dev tools with a little bit limited features, but still things related to JavaScript, so like recording CPU profiles, heap snapshots, which are great for looking for memory leaks, as well as like allocations, so like what is using up this memory over time. Funny story, I actually found a bug in the code that I was writing because I had been just working on a certain project and ignoring all of our lint rules at the time. And the linter was finding so many rules that it created a bottleneck in the build time. And so once I fixed those, it was easy to see inside the profile that it was the ESLint loader that was causing that bottleneck. So definitely check out those profiling tools. So what we can do is, if we hit play, and Webpack is running its build process right now as we speak. And so just by having debugger statements inside of these plugin hooks, you can now have access, just like you would in the browser for any JavaScript application. You can explore the arguments that are available inside of the plugin. And so for the compiler.plugin run hook, it has access to the compiler. And then kind of a handler for errors. So this is great for if you want to have a callback to basically custom output some properties or functionality. As well as you can see all of the different items and objects that are part of the Webpack plugin API. So in this case, this hook just literally executes when Webpack runs. And there's a whole bunch of different hooks that you can take a look at underneath the plugin API docs on our GitHub IO doc page. So right now we're not really doing anything fancy, but this allows you to take and, let's say if I wanted to write a console when this starts, let's go ahead and turn off Inception here. So I'll just cancel the process, and we'll jump back into that code. We can go into our config. Let's say whenever the build runs, we'll console.log. OMG, I'm on ngAir. And we'll add a console log for this statement as well for the parser, and we'll jump to the parser after. My codes. Okay. So we'll go ahead and just run it. Why don't we do the build so we can actually see the output first? Hey, there we go. So that's kind of an easy way to kind of test what you're going to do. And you can even do it with debug as well. So like let's say if I have it side by side and we want to take a look and compare. We'll reload. This URL stays the same, so it's nice to just reload. And we can hit play and just skip the breakpoints, and we'll actually see the same thing happening. So this is kind of a nice feature. It gives you kind of like an interactive playground with how to kind of, for me, it's not only learning about Webpack and the different hooks that are available, but it also kind of gives you a little bit more clarity on how things are executing, whether it's asynchronous or not, or how plugins fit into the entire Webpack ecosystem.
That's okay. I actually prefer to put console.log every other line of my code and see what gets outputted.
Yeah.
But either one of those is probably a good option.
Now, I mean, if we have time, I can spend just a titch to kind of talk about the power of the plugins. So, long story short, the Webpack source code is all really surrounded around one mix-up. It's kind of similar to the difference is that you can actually modify the instance that essentially calls that event. So the terminology is plugin and apply, kind of like emit, and I think when you listen to the event. But let's say, for example, if I want to looking at this sample code here, Webpack has a parser instance, which is tappable, and you can actually have a hook at the symbol level for all of your code base. So let's say if I go into, I don't know, the source here, main, this is going to execute. Actually, there's already some if statements in here, so we should see it break into those breakpoints. But you can, let's go ahead and restart and see if we're run the code again. Let's see, did it stop? Let's try that one more time. Oh, I think I removed the debug statements. Let's put it inside the parser. Okay, so when we reload our DevTools here, and we play, you can actually see the tappable tab show up, and that's because it's a plugin and it's being executed by that base mixin library. So do we make it? Statement if. Yes. Cool. Just do something easy like eval, call eval. So anytime that eval is called, which is, you definitely don't want to do, but just an example, we can also stop on it. So I think if I just did eval, we should see that break here. Just in case. Well, it doesn't look like it wants to stop there. Compiler.parser.plugin. I know I'm probably missing something simple.
Can you explain like the difference between a plugin and a loader? Because a lot of
Yeah.
people they hear like there's a loader, there's a plugin, like there's two ways to plug into Webpack. Like what's the difference here?
So a loader's main purpose is to provide like transforms one file at a time on your files. So essentially, the way that I describe it is loaders tell Webpack how to treat non-JavaScript files inside of your project, or even ES6, or like you can have a loader for ClojureScript or for anything. It can be a custom loader, but essentially you provide a loader two things. So one, the name of the node module, like Babel loader, and then a regex that represents the extension for when you want to apply what kind of files on that loader. So essentially, plugin, as Tobias has said, or Sokra as some people know him, a plugin does everything that a loader can't. And so a plugin has access to all of the compiler, the compilation, all of the different hooks and access points that are available inside of Webpack to modify any part of that compilation or build or bundle step.
So in this project, there's an Angular 2 template loader that you created. Do you think you could go into the node modules and put a debugger inside of that code so we could see what's going on there?
Nice.
Well, you also need to add it because it's not in here, I guess.
Oh, is it not in there?
Yeah, I guess
Okay.
you got it a slightly older version.
I do have an older version, but yes.
So you could, just show installing it and stuff.
Angular 2 template loader. Yeah, so the motivation behind this, implementing this, was that we wanted to give people kind of an automagical way to inline their templates rather than just specify inside of a component decorator the paths for them. The Webpack way to do it would be you would require that file right there in the template property. But we were kind of challenged working on the Angular CLI to do this in a way that's kind of idiomatic to the user, and so that's kind of where this loader came into play. So to apply a loader, after I install it, I just need to, let's see, just in case, I should just npm install everything. But loaders can be chained together, and so I'm just going to modify this to loaders, which can also be an array, and add that Angular 2 template loader.
And I think you probably need to change the tsconfig.
Let's see. I could just check out the latest version of this project, and that would.
Oh no, there's so much.
Oh.
So much has changed.
There's so many differences. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think which parts that I want to modify. We can crash through it and find out.
No, it's the awesome TypeScript loader. You need to tell it to use the thing. So it's here.
To use what?
You need to, okay, so awesome TypeScript loader options, add a property use Webpack text true.
Oh, that's right. I was like, oh, I usually pass that inside of the configuration, so I was like, oh, okay. Yes, so
okay, that's right, yeah.
That's one of the features of awesome TypeScript loader, is that you can use the TypeScript compilation strategy, or you can deliberately pass files individually to be transpiled, and so that's just one extra property that we need to change. So yeah, use Webpack text. True. Okay, so let's give it a shot and see if it works. Oh, well, hey, there's there's our if statement hook.
Yay.
Well, I think what we can do is, regardless of the errors, I can stop somewhere inside of that loader, and we can see what's happening with it. So let's just set a debugger here. And
So put one inside of the loader itself, like the function.
yeah. So a loader in its simplest form is just a function that takes a source, which is the file that's passed to it, and then returns a new version. And so all we're doing, like I said, is performing a simple transform on a file, except Webpack does this asynchronously to all of your files that you specify for your loaders. Right, npm run debug. See if we'll get this to stop this time. We should. All right, hey, we're on ngAir. Oh. Oh, you know what? I wonder if it's because I need environment flags to be passed through to get into some of your code. That would be it.
Hey, Sean, do you have a power cable? Looks like your juice is about to
Oh, it
expire.
is.
We
Yeah,
don't want to lose you.
I can plug it in. Secretly behind the scenes, I'm doing that. Okay, so let's just add that environment flag so it does the same thing. I think that's what our problem was. Okay, live coding. Okay, here we go. So let's do npm run debug. Okay. Oh, it looks like it did stop again. Well, that's strange that it's not loading. I can try one other thing. I wonder if this is just, so I have a lot more reliability using Node Nightly versus Node 6. But through Node Nightly and Canary have been, although they're the most bleeding edge, most developers are going to have it. I've been able to set breakpoints through loaders before. I'm assuming you have too, Patrick.
I only use Node Nightly for debugging.
Then we should do that. So npm install Node Nightly. Well, I know we're almost running out of time, so I can keep doing this if you guys have other questions.
Wait, I did want to get to, you can wrap up on this if you have some final points, but we are getting near the top of the hour, and I do have one more quick topic that I wanted to cover.
Absolutely.
So is there something else on this you wanted to show?
No, I guess the three things, and we can take this away as Sean's live coding experience also. But so the best ways to go about it, and I published an article on Medium. You can go to medium.com/webpack under our publication, and that always talks about using Node Nightly as one of our tools to debug. And so that's been the most reliable. I'm sure Patrick can. But otherwise, set breakpoints anywhere and explore the code for Webpack, because there's 100 different things that you can find out on how to use it. And it's really, it can be frustrating at first, but the developer experience after you get it is probably the most satisfying feeling, and I think that's maybe why I enjoy using Webpack so much.
So I'm totally with you on this. I am. But the realization that most people are sort of like way over on this side, that they don't, just copy and paste from other people, just even getting them to read the documentation is like a step in the close direction. Totally get it that getting them over on this other side where you are to read the source code is would be great. But it's good to know that it's something that you think is kind of approachable. So I think I'm going to at least try that approach, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that's kind of exciting is that I'm hoping to be working with Paul Irish and the Chrome Dev Tool or the Chrome DevTools team, so that Webpack can be a super awesome experience. So hopefully, look forward to that in the near future as well.
Cool. Okay. One last quick topic before we get to the picks. So, this is an Angular show. We've talked only kind of briefly about Angular through the show. Can you give me kind of a couple-minute quick spiel on why you think Webpack makes Angular awesome?
So, and I guess I have points for both Angular 1 and 2, if that's appropriate. We have a whole bunch of Angular 1 users out there still.
Sure.
Yeah. If you're using Grunt or Gulp, switch to Webpack, and there are a lot of great resources or boilerplates. It helps automate processes that you used to kind of find a pain. So things like having to use like template cache. Well, Webpack can help require HTML files so that you can automatically have those inlined. It's also super great for kind of enforcing design patterns that make Webpack really readable, or I'm sorry, Angular really readable and usable. So Patrick even had a really great, one of the first repos I ever saw about Angular 1 in Webpack, which is I think ES6 starter or NG6 starter.
Yeah, it's NG6 starter.
Yeah, that was an awesome repo, and it even had generators in it. So it allows you to never have to worry about how the code setup is taking place, and that's something that, as an Angular user, especially for Angular 2, there's so many steps to get started, and so Webpack makes it Angular 2. It helps kind of pin all of those pieces together in your, which would be usually a mundane or kind of a tedious setup process. And whether it be through the Angular CLI, which is now using Webpack, also just all the awesome boilerplates out there like the Angular 2 starter, getting started right away and using Angular is easier than ever.
Yeah, I would even go further, or maybe frame it in a different way for as far as Angular 2 goes, that you can certainly not use Webpack with Angular 2. But to be quite frank, at this point, you're going to be fighting against the grain, because clearly the core team has sort of adopted it. It's going to be baked into the CLI. Most people that Patrick and I work with are all sort of centering around using Webpack. So even though I think people are sort of hesitant to say this, I'll come out and say that it's sort of the de facto standard for a lot of the, at least for the near term here, with a lot of the Angular 2 development that's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, there's nothing wrong. Like, I understand people maybe wanting to be concerned about being married to a specific tool, and I completely understand that. And there's also people out there who say, well, HTTP2 is coming, we're not going to need to bundle our code, and really that's not the case at all. When you think about all the dependencies that you use in an application, especially with HTTP2, that could be up to 300, 400 node modules. So even if you serve up an individual file for every dependency that you're requesting, at a scale like that, you're still going to have lots of overhead and delay time, even with that much multiprocessing. For Webpack 2, we have probably one of the most recent features that we added is support for HTTP2 by using what's called aggressive splitting. And so it kind of takes the same idea of doing code splitting, but then it allows you to control and tweak how many different bundles you create. So yeah, having like, let's say 10 or 12 different bundles for your code for HTTP2 is really optimal versus, let's say, you know, 1 or 2. And so Webpack is going to support that and still bundle your code and then let you kind of tweak it back and forth and have modules in those bundles individually sorted for optimization. So it's supposedly a really cool feature. I've played with it once or twice, but I do TTP2 setup yet to really kind of take it for a drive. But you know, I see the future of Webpack being bundling as a spec, and so maybe it's not coined as Webpack, but it's everything that comes with the education of knowing how, you know, why are we needing to do this today, and do we need to still do it? And maybe this kind of stuff should be a standard. And so, you know, we're trying to work with as many people as possible to ensure that the output or the outcome of Webpack, which is a really killer dev experience with a dev server and super high performance without having to really struggle over too much tweaking, just be something that happens in, you know, like your IDE or, you know, a dev tools for any browser. And so, you know, that's kind of the path that we're wanting to take. And you know, once we get our documentation handled, I think that's the road to come.
We do have one Twitter question. Do you know when Webpack and the CLI will drop in NPM? I think you mentioned earlier that it's close.
I think it's really close. They were saying we were just waiting on Travis tests to pass in green for that release, and so once that branch was good to go, we were going to release it.
You could, so like Hans just tweeted just now, if you npm install angular-CLI at Webpack, then you could start utilizing it today.
There you go. I saw the message, but I didn't have time to switch over.
Cool, great tip. All right, let's get to our picks. Justin, why don't you start off?
Okay, my pick is for a meetup group called Angular Zone. They have a webinar going tomorrow with Kara on Angular 2 forums, so it should be pretty interesting. You guys should check that out if you get a chance. Just check. We'll have a link in the show notes.
Cool, thanks, Justin. Patrick.
Yeah, so Angular class just dropped Angular 2 Fundamentals course for free, so you can get that at Angular class. So that's my pick. My other pick is I wrote a small blog post on Angular 2 conventions. Angular 2 conventions loader, which is basically taking the power of Webpack and automating a lot of conventions that we normally do in Angular. So rather than doing add components in Angular 2, rather than doing add components and then add the selector, add the template or whatever, Webpack will do that automatically for you using the Angular 2 convention. So it'll automatically take the class name and convert it to a selector, or automatically inject like the template and styles and everything. So that's something else that's pretty cool with Webpack.
That's a good why Webpack answer right there. That's one of the potentials of it, right?
It's a very small use of Webpack power because there's so much you could do. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, having that much auto magic is doable with, you know, really not that much effort. The loader is not that big, is it? From what I've seen, Patrick.
No, it's really simple. Like if I knew more about regular expressions, it would be a lot smaller.
Yeah, learn red. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it was mostly like a lot of people were asking me for features, so I just kind of like put them all in there. So it's pretty cool.
Cool. All right, Sean, what do you got?
Use Node Nightly for all your debugging for your node processes. This is kind of a good learning process, but I think it's it's a well-maintained repo by a guy named Hmanth. I think I said it right. But you can go to you can just download it with npm install node-nightly -g with the global flag, and you can start using it right away. It's kind of instant access instead of trying to go about downloading the binary, etc. So that's a great. And then second pick would be take a look at our new webpack.io repo. So it's kind of the inception of the start of our new documentation. A lot of things are going to be copy-pasted over and then revised for content, but we did just release our first kind of intro doc that gives a high level of kind of the 5 W's, you know, what, why, where, and how of Webpack. And I would say the third pick would be you kind of plugged it earlier, or not Angular, but Webpack. It has all of the kind of everything, or I like to say Webpack all the things. This is all the things Webpack. So take a look at that, and you can find out all sorts of different resources, along with kind of all the different frameworks that are using Webpack underneath, I guess, or black boxed, from Laravel to Angular CLI to create React app. So it's kind of exciting, and you can kind of have everything at your fingertips.
Sean, you're not allowed to say the R word. I'm going to have to ban you from the show.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Sean. Thank you for joining us as well. For my pick, I just have one pick, really. There was a great blog post I read called The Principles of Quantum Team Management. It was written by James Everingham, who's the head of engineering at Instagram. And I thought it was super interesting. You know, the main gist that TLDR, is that to not micromanage, not even provide very detailed feedback to your developers. Instead, just provide a container that they can kind of live in, like their own kind of world, and just give them freedom and, you know, some high-level guidance, but let them kind of figure out stuff on their own. So the title comes from, you know, quantum mechanics, which is really all about unpredictable behavior and making it understandable. And so the idea is that you don't try and force people to behave a certain way and to do everything at a fine-tuned certain way. You sort of let within the container which would they work, them behave in whichever way they figure out. It's sort of unpredictable, but you sort of just understand it and create sort of these higher level goals and direction to lead the team, and that gives them a feeling of freedom, feeling that they are accomplishing something, and at least at Instagram, in implementing these types of ideas, they have seen, you know, great success. So I was pretty inspired by this and highly recommend other people read it, especially if you are a manager of any sorts.
Maybe you can use it in open source projects too.
Yes, actually, I think it does apply to open source a lot. Yeah, for sure.
And take a look at it.
Yeah. Okay, and just for upcoming shows, note that next week, Patrick, I don't know if you noticed, but we're supposed to do a Angular Universal tutorial. You ready for that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we got to talk about that. But yes, that is.
The tables have turned. I think I'm going to be a panel member.
That would be funny. Maybe we'll do that if you're available. Yeah, that would be funny. So yes, that's on the table for next week. And then the week after, on the 16th, we have Austin McDaniel coming in to talk about Angular Data Table. And then on August 25th, I am actually on vacation, but that doesn't matter because it's going to be the Todd Motto Show. You guys better be prepared. It is going to be unreal. All right. That's it for this week. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us. See you next week. Have a good one, everyone. Bye.
See ya.
See ya.